Welcome to today's video, which is about navigating conflict. So this is helping you have healthy management for your conflict. And it's such an important topic because if we're in a relationship, we're going to have conflict. It's just part of living with another person. And when you understand the benefit of conflict and you manage it well, it can be really positive. It can allow you to understand the other person, their values, their needs, their priorities. And so when we have any sort of communication breakdown where we're differing in our expectations, a lot of times conflict arises as a result. And so if we look at it as an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding, conflict can be okay. We can weather that storm. And I really think about conflict as an inevitable part of any intimate relationship because we are different. And if we're building a life together, there's going to be parts, there's going to be times, there's going to be things we don't necessarily agree on. And if we think that a healthy relationship is one without conflict, then we're going to get disappointed because it is part of it. If I work with a couple and they say they never have any conflict, then my initial thought is they might be avoiding something. So I'm going to talk about two types of conflict. One's solvable and one's perpetual. So solvable conflicts are those that can be resolved through good communication, compromise, and problem-solving strategies. These conflicts typically arise from specific issues or disagreements that can be addressed or resolved through any sort of skill or negotiation. And then we have perpetual conflicts. These are ongoing issues that might never be resolved in your relationship. And they can often stem from fundamental differences in your personality, your culture, your values, your lifestyle preference. So while perpetual conflicts might not have a clear solution, couples are able to learn how to manage and navigate the issues through feeling more acceptance, more understanding, or trying to seek some level of compromise. Regardless of what type of conflict, it's really essential that couples engage in a good discussion around it. So there's constructive conflict behavior, such as being able to be a good communicator, an active listener, being empathetic. One thing that's really important is using I statements and seeking compromise. So these are key factors in maintaining a relationship. It helps you be able to ride the storms of conflict. On the other hand, there's destructive conflict behaviors such as criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. All of those can really erode trust and intimacy within relationships. So in conflict management, we have to talk about communication. Communication skills during conflict allows you to be able to have more understanding and curiosity. The biggest piece of advice I give people is to use an I statement when you're expressing your feelings and needs. So when you use an I statement, it allows you to communicate what you're feeling or experiencing without putting blame on the other person. So if you're in an emotional conversation, stop saying you, just say I. This helps change the energy. In addition to that, always being able to be that active listener and validating the other person is really essential because it allows the other person to feel safe and reduces the chances that their ego might come up. And so being able to validate someone's feelings, even if you don't agree with them entirely, that's okay. Along these same lines, using something called a softened startup. So how conflicts begin is usually how they end. And when you're initiating a discussion with criticism or contempt, that is going to escalate the conflict really, really fast. And it's going to make resolution really difficult. So instead, a softened startup involves expressing concerns or needs in a respectful and non-blaming manner. This is where the I statements come in. And it's also being able to be more gentle and positive. And as a result, when you have a conversation that starts off with that, couples are more likely to engage in productive dialogue and reach a compromise. So if I'm upset with my husband, if I'm not being very mindful about my words, I'm going to come at it with my ego and I'm going to say, you always do this. That is like the number one thing we say that is going to get their ego triggered and going to probably make them be put on the defensive immediately. So say I come home and the kitchen's a mess, and my expectations were that I'd come home and the kitchen's clean. So I'd come in and I say, you always leave the kitchen a mess. How do you think he's going to respond? So if I'm being mindful, I come in and I notice the kitchen's a mess. I might cuss in my head. I might get a little upset in my head. But how I start is, hey, I just realized when I came in, I was really hoping that the kitchen would be clean. Do you think next time I work all day, you can be more mindful or prioritize cleaning the kitchen? So much softer. And notice, neither is about holding in my feelings. Just one is about expressing my needs and my desires and my expectations in a much clearer way. Remember, all good communication is about seeking understanding and not just picking things apart. So be curious, be mindful, recognize your ego. So in addition to good communication, we have to be able to regulate our emotions in conflict. So emotions arise and it kind of creates an escalated, tense energy in any sort of conversation. And you want to be able to manage your emotions. And sometimes that might take deeper breathing, taking a pause, taking a break. I shot a video about regulating your emotions. That's a really helpful guide to understanding what your emotions are coming up to tell you and strategies for you to be able to soothe your nervous system, to regulate yourself. If we're coming into a conversation with too much emotion, it's going to filter out all communication. We're only going to be paying attention to really what we're feeling, and it's going to complicate the whole thing. So if you're in an emotional conversation with your partner and you're starting to notice yourself get really heated, take a break. The higher our heart rate gets, the less likely we're able to listen and to understand through our prefrontal cortex. So good communication, managing emotions, and being able to know if you've reached that point where you're no longer going to reach any sort of compromise, take a break. Have 15 minutes. Communicate that to your partner that you need a little bit of time and space. One quick tip for people who get really emotional: deep breathe. Really think about your breathing. This is going to allow your nervous system to relax, and it's going to allow you to have better communication longer. Another essential component in managing conflict is being able to find common ground. So this is about finding a solution and compromise during a conflict. Seek to understand where you're on the same page. What are your common goals? What are your common interests? So a lot of times when we're in a fight with someone, we're trying to win, instead of trying to understand, like, what's the ultimate goal? Is it to have a good relationship? Okay, so that's going to make you have a bigger perspective about what is the common ground here, and being able to say to your partner, I just want to get along, or I just want to overcome this. It allows you to share a mindset and a shared goal. And as a result, it allows you to diminish how loud your ego is talking, and then you can both mutually work on a solution together. So being able and being willing to understand each other's perspectives and being able to ask, what's our common ground? Common ground gives you the foundation for compromise. So compromise is a really necessary skill to be able to resolve conflicts. You want to be open to negotiating, find a middle ground, figure out solutions that address both of your needs and concerns. Any good compromise has to involve flexibility, empathy, and a willingness to make concessions for the sake of the relationship's well-being. And finally, to manage conflict, we have to accept our own influence. We have to be open to understanding how we're adding to the conflict, and therefore are responsible in finding a resolution. So we have to consider and value each other's opinions, preferences, and suggestions. And when we sit in that receptive state, to be able to see and understand what the other person wants, to be open to their input, this fosters a really important sense of collaboration and teamwork that allows you to find solution. So in order to manage your conflict, you want to have good communication. You want to feel a sense of emotional regulation. You want to find common ground to build a foundation of compromise. And you want to be able to understand your own influence. If you do all of those things, then you're not going to build resentment. Unresolved resentment has such an impact on relationships. And if I'm working with a couple and notice that there's a lot of resentment that's built up, what that tells me is that they have a lot of conflict and no resolution. And so if there's too much resentment built up in your relationship, you have to then prioritize forgiveness and letting go of the grudges. Being able to forgive and let go allows you to move forward and build these skills. Because the quickest way to undo any progress to managing conflict is to feel the energy of resentment. You have to be able to forgive. You have to be able to let go. And if you cannot do that, then it may be a relationship that's been too tarnished, that there's been too many things that have happened in the relationship for you to be able to feel safe and hopeful that you can both move forward in a more constructive way. Managing conflict is such an important skill because, like I said at the beginning, all of us are going to have conflict. We're going to have arguments because we're all different. And so if you are building that life with someone and you're not seeing eye to eye, use these aspects that I've talked about. See how you can improve your communication, how you could better regulate, build your skill around compromise, accept your influence. That constructive conflict allows us to move through difficult times easier. If you're falling into any of the things I've said earlier around contempt, stonewalling, defensiveness, and criticism, then you're going to move through conflict and you're going to feel drained by it. You're going to feel so taxed because those four aspects really, really deconstruct any intimacy, any trust, and any resolution for couples. And those are the quickest way that builds long-term resentment. And so if you're struggling with any of these, feel free to ask for help. Find someone who can provide a third party or just a non-biased opinion that can see and have greater perspective about what's not working, because sometimes it's just one thing that needs to be healed in a relationship. And once it's healed, then communication flows. You can manage conflict really easier. As a result, you have better intimacy and trust. So don't stall. Don't think that asking for help is a sign of failure. Building your relationship and building all these facets allows you to have such a satisfying life. And if you're having a difficult time doing it on your own, then please find someone, find a mentor, a coach, a therapist that you fit with that can help provide resources and a structure for improving all of these skills. If you have any more questions around conflict, just leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and send it to anyone you think might benefit too. Thank you.